That $5,000 transmission rebuild estimate sitting in your glove box is a lie. In fact, up to 90% of the automatic transmission failures that roll into my shop every single week have absolutely nothing to do with bad engineering, missed fluid changes, or manufacturing defects. You are being told that your gearbox simply reached the end of its natural life. But the reality is far more frustrating. You are quietly destroying your own transmission every single day, multiple times a day, through a single unconscious driving habit that you probably learned in driver's ed. It is a habit so invisible that you do not even realize you are doing it, yet it is costing car owners thousands of dollars in completely unnecessary workshop bills. Let me tell you about a black SUV that rolled into my bay just last year. The owner was the dream customer. She kept every single service receipt organized in a Ziploc bag. Oil changed religiously every 5,000 miles. Transmission fluid serviced exactly on the manufacturer's schedule. Her vehicle had just cleared 112,000 miles when her gear shifts started feeling slightly rough between first and second, and just a little bit hesitant when moving into third. It was not a violent shudder, just a subtle change in the vehicle's behavior. She took it to the dealership, and they did exactly what dealerships do. They hooked up a scanner, looked at her odometer, and handed her an estimate for $40,000 to drop the transmission and rebuild it. They told her it was just normal wear and tear for that mileage. When she brought the vehicle to my shop for a second opinion, she sat in my office holding that paperwork with tears in her eyes. The very first thing she asked me was, "What did I do wrong?" She had not raced the vehicle. She had never towed a single trailer. She did not abuse the throttle. She simply drove the car exactly the way her parents taught her to drive. And yet, hidden inside her daily commute was a microscopic mistake that was eating her gearbox alive from the inside out. The service advisors at the dealership will never tell you about this because there is no profit margin in teaching you how to drive. The manufacturers bury the reality because they want you to believe their components are completely foolproof, or they want you to accept that a transmission failure at 120,000 miles is just a normal cost of vehicle ownership. It is not normal. A modern automatic transmission is fundamentally built to survive 250,000 to 300,000 miles if it is treated the way the engineers actually intended. But the industry has a massive secret they refuse to admit. Out loud, the vast majority of mechanical failures on these units are caused by a shifting habit that drivers learned decades ago on completely different mechanical systems. And nobody has ever bothered to correct them. Think about exactly how you left your driveway this morning. You started the engine, threw the selector into reverse, and backed out into the street. Now, picture the exact moment the vehicle stopped moving backward and started moving forward. This is where 90% of drivers commit the ultimate transmission sin. They move the gear selector from reverse into drive while the vehicle is still carrying a slight backward momentum. You might think you are not doing it. You might think you only do it when you are in a rush. But the truth is, most drivers shift while the car is still rolling backward by just an inch or two. It feels completely harmless from the driver's seat. The car does not make a horrible noise, it does not jerk violently, and it seamlessly picks up and moves forward. Because it feels smooth, you assume the machinery inside is perfectly fine with it. But you are treating your gear selector like it is a simple electrical toggle switch. You flip the lever, and you expect the car to just figure it out. That is not how a modern automatic gearbox operates. When you move that lever, you are not just changing a digital signal. You are initiating a highly complex, incredibly precise hydraulic ballet inside a sealed aluminum housing. The moment you shift from reverse to drive, the transmission has to execute a multi-step sequence. It has to completely drain fluid pressure from the reverse clutch packs. It has to open and close a series of electronic solenoids in a specific millisecond window. It has to neutralize the internal fluid pressures inside the torque converter. It has to align multiple planetary gear sets, and then it has to pump highly pressurized fluid into the forward clutch packs to squeeze the friction discs together. Here is the kicker. The software calibration engineers who programmed that transmission wrote every single line of code based on one absolute assumption. They assumed the vehicle would be at a complete dead stop when this sequence occurs. They calibrated the fluid pressure rise for zero shaft speed. They designed the friction material for zero motion. When you shift into drive, while your wheels are still rotating backward, you are violently subverting that entire design. You are forcing the forward clutch packs to aggressively clamp down on a transmission output shaft that is actively spinning in the exact opposite direction. This is not a smooth transition. It is a controlled mechanical collision occurring inside your gearbox. Instead of the clutches simply locking together to transfer power from a standstill, the friction plates are forced to act as a brake. They have to absorb the entire kinetic energy of a 2-ton moving vehicle, stop that backward momentum entirely, and then force it to rotate forward, all in a fraction of a second. Every single time you do this, microscopic layers of the precious friction material are sheared right off the plates. Every time you do it, the steel plates generate a sudden, massive spike of localized heat that they were never engineered to dissipate. Every time you do it, your transmission fluid takes on a heavy dose of microscopic clutch debris, accelerating the degradation of the oil and moving the entire system closer to a catastrophic pressure drop. This is not a theoretical scenario. This is not some rare exception. When I pull down failing transmissions that come into my workshop with slipping gears and harsh engagement, the autopsy looks identical every single time. The forward clutch packs are completely glazed over from extreme heat. The friction material is worn down unevenly or flaking off entirely. The fluid is scorched dark and heavily contaminated with debris that clogs the valve body. And yet, the owners always look me dead in the eye and swear they have driven that car gently since the day they bought it. They are telling the truth. They did drive gently. They just never realized that shifting between reverse and drive without bringing the vehicle to an absolute dead halt is the mechanical equivalent of slipping a manual clutch 100 times every single week. The reason this issue is so incredibly insidious is because modern gearboxes are remarkably resilient. They are engineered to tolerate a staggering amount of abuse. A high-quality transmission will absorb this punishment for 40,000, 60,000, or even 100,000 miles before it ever shows a single external symptom. There is no warning light on your dashboard that flashes when you shift too early. There is no immediate warning sound. The vehicle continues to feel perfectly smooth because the internal computer is working overtime behind the scenes to mask your bad habits by the time you finally start to notice a slightly hard shift on a cold morning, or a tiny flare in engine RPM between gears. The mechanical damage has already been accumulating silently for years. At that stage, a simple fluid flush cannot save the transmission because the physical friction material is already sitting at the bottom of the pan, and this exact same destruction happens in multiple directions. Drivers do it when they shift from drive to reverse, while creeping forward into a parking spot. They do it in fast food drive-thrus. They do it during quick 3-point turns, and they do it when parallel parking on busy streets. Every single time those wheels are rotating opposite to the gear you are selecting, you are using your internal transmission clutches as a set of brake pads. But there is a third silent killer tied directly to this habit that completely wrecks another vital component inside your driveline. And it happens right when you think the drive is completely over. It involves a tiny piece of metal no larger than your thumb, and if you do not change how you park your vehicle immediately, you are risking a catastrophic mechanical snap that will leave you completely stranded. Here is the fix most dealers will never mention because it does not require a single expensive tool, a line item on a service invoice, or a replacement part from their inventory. The ultimate solution to stopping this silent destruction and saving your gearbox from a multi-thousand-dollar rebuild is complete free, and it boils down to an intentional change in your daily behavior. It is a mechanical reset that takes exactly 1 second of your time. Before we look at the simple habit that reverses this trend, you need to understand the third silent killer I mentioned, because it explains exactly why your transmission takes a brutal beating right when you think your drive is completely finished. It involves the mechanism that locks your vehicle in place when you park. Most drivers have a habit of shifting the transmission lever into the park position, while the vehicle is still carrying a tiny amount of forward or backward momentum, even just a fraction of an inch, as they coast into a parking space or garage. Inside your automatic gearbox, there is a small, heavy-duty metal wedge called a parking pawl. This pawl is roughly the size of your thumb. When you slide that lever into park, you are mechanically forcing this metal wedge to drop into a notched gear that is directly connected to your transmission output shaft and your drive wheels. If your vehicle is completely stationary, the pawl drops smoothly into a notch, locking the drivetrain safely. But if the vehicle is still rolling, even at less than 1 mile per hour, that parking pawl does not drop smoothly. It slams violently into the teeth of that spinning notched gear, that familiar, heavy clunk or distinct click you hear and feel in the shifter. When you park on an incline or shift while rolling is not a normal operational sound. That is the sound of a critical metal safety component taking a massive shock load it was never engineered to withstand. Over years of daily repetition, this repeated impact deforms the edge of the pawl, rounds off the sharp locking corners of the parking gear notches, and stretches the internal linkage. In the worst cases, I have torn down on the shop floor. The parking pawl has snapped clean off, sending jagged metal fragments traveling straight through the precision gear trains and valve channels, instantly turning a healthy gearbox into a piece of scrap metal. The fix for this entire, multi-layered problem requires a strict, 3-step execution every single time you operate your vehicle. It is a process designed to align perfectly with the fluid pressures and internal mechanical tolerances of modern automatic machinery. Stepper number 1 is mastering the absolute halt. When you are backing out of a driveway or maneuvering into a parking spot, you must bring the vehicle to an undeniable complete stop using the primary foot brake. Your wheels must show 0 rotation. Step number 2 is the golden rule of the workshop. Respect the 1-second pause. Once the vehicle is completely stopped, you move the gear selector to the desired gear. Whether that is moving from reverse to drive or drive to reverse, and you count to 1 full second before you take your foot off the brake pedal. Do not shift and immediately stab the gas pedal. That single, deliberate 1-second pause is the exact window of time required for the internal computer to lower the hydraulic pressure in the previous clutch circuit, open the correct electronic solenoids, fill the oncoming clutch packs with oil, and allow the internal shafts to completely equalize their direction. You are letting the fluid pressure do the heavy lifting, rather than forcing the mechanical friction discs to act as emergency brakes. Step number 3 is the correct parking sequence to protect that fragile parking pawl. When you pull into a parking space, keep your foot pressed firmly down on the service brake pedal. While the vehicle is completely still, pull your parking brake or emergency brake lever first, or engage the electronic parking brake switch. Let the parking brake completely hold the weight of the vehicle. Only after the parking brake is set do you slide the gear selector into the park position. By doing this, you ensure that the entire kinetic weight of your 2-ton vehicle is resting safely on the heavy-duty brake shoes or calipers at the wheels, rather than hanging precariously on a tiny metal wedge inside your expensive transmission. To show you how powerful this behavioral fix is, let us go back to that nurse with the black SUV and the $4,800 repair estimate. When we checked her vehicle on the lift, the transmission fluid was starting to look dark and discolored from the localized heat of early clutch glazing. But the internal scanner data showed that her computer's adaptive learning values had not yet reached their maximum correction limits. The mechanical components had taken a beating, but they had not crossed the point of no return. Instead of pulling the transmission out, we performed a high-quality fluid exchange to clear out the microscopic friction debris and restore the oil's heat dissipation properties. Next, we hooked up a professional diagnostic computer to clear the transmission control module's adaptive memory. This forced the computer to forget the bad habits and high fluid pressures it had developed over years of compensating for her shifting style. Finally, I took her out on a 15-minute test drive and made her practice the 1-second pause and the proper parking brake sequence until it became second nature. the total cost for that fluid service and computer reset was a tiny fraction of the Delershi P's massive rebuild quote. 8 months later, she sent me a quick update. Her vehicle had covered an additional 12,000 miles of daily commuting, and the rough, shifting, and hesitation between gears had completely vanished. The vehicle performed perfectly smoothly, not because we had installed expensive new parts, but because we had completely halted the internal friction wear before it could breach the threshold of mechanical failure. However, you must be incredibly careful to avoid the common mistakes and misconceptions that run rampant online regarding this issue. The biggest misconception is the belief that modern smart transmissions have built-in electronic safeguards that completely prevent this type of damage. Many modern vehicles do feature software that will reject a catastrophic shift, such as accidentally throwing the car into reverse while traveling at 50 miles per hour on the highway. But these electronic limiters are completely blind to low speed, microscopic abuse. The computer cannot feel the subtle 1-inch roll in a grocery store parking lot. It will allow the shift to happen because it is programmed to prioritize driver convenience and rapid execution over maximum mechanical longevity. The software assumes that if you moved the lever, you want the vehicle to move immediately, and it will sacrifice a tiny layer of clutch material every single time to give you that seamless transition. Another massive mistake car owners make when they start noticing a rough shift is relying on cheap transmission fix, additives, or mystery CH chemicals poured directly into the dipstick tube. These bottles promise to stop slipping and smooth out rough shifts instantly. In reality, these formulas often contain aggressive solvents and swelling agents designed to artificially soften internal rubber seals and make friction plates temporarily sticky. While they might mask a symptom for a few weeks, they actively accelerate the breakdown of the remaining healthy friction material and degrade the underlying chemistry of your transmission fluid, completely destroying any chance you have of saving the gearbox through simple behavior modification. Do not fall into the trap of believing that a vehicle's rugged reputation or a manufacturer's branding exempts it from the laws of physics. It does not matter if you drive a heavy-duty truck, a compact commuter car, or a highly reliable crossover. Every single automatic transmission utilizing hydraulic fluid and friction plates is entirely vulnerable to this exact wear pattern. The durability of your drivetrain is not determined by a marketing brochure or a salesperson's promises. It is determined by the exact manner in which you manage the transitions of kinetic energy between your wheels and your internal gears. When you finally commit to mastering that 1-second pause and respecting the mechanical transition of your vehicle, you are gaining far more than just a smoother ride down the road. You are actively rewriting the longevity curve of your entire vehicle. By eliminating those low-speed shock loads, you can realistically extend the operational lifespan of your automatic gearbox by 50% or more. Pushing a component that typically flags at 120,000 miles all the way past the 250,000-mile mark without a single internal mechanical repair. But the benefits do not stop inside the transmission casing. Think about the physical path that kinetic energy takes when you shift a rolling vehicle. That sudden twist of direction doesn't just assault your internal clutch packs. It travels instantly outward through the torque converter, slams into the differential gears, twists the constant velocity axle joints, and yanks violently against your rubber engine and transmission mounts. When you stop using your transmission as a brake, you instantly stop the accelerated tearing of those costly rubber mounts. You prevent the premature clicking and binding of expensive drive axles. You preserve the precise alignment of your front suspension, and you ensure that every dollar you invest into your vehicle goes toward actual forward momentum rather than absorbing unnecessary, self-inflicted structural punishment. To maximize these long-term gains and ensure that your drivetrain remains completely bulletproof for decades, you need to pair your new shifting discipline with a few critical, complementary maintenance habits that the modern automotive industry heavily downplays. The first complementary habit is rejecting the absolute myth of lifetime transmission fluid. When a manufacturer prints the word lifetime in your service manual, L or on the dipstick plug. They are not defining the lifetime of the vehicle. They are defining the lifetime of the factory warranty. Once that warranty expires, their financial obligation ends, and their definition of lifetime is officially over. True preventative maintenance means executing a clean fluid exchange, not a high-pressure flush, every 30,000 to 45,000 miles, depending on how heavily you commute or carry cargo. A high-pressure flush machine can aggressively force loosened debris backward into the microscopic passages of your transmission's valve body, creating the exact shifting problems you are trying to avoid. A gentle, gravity-fed fluid exchange replaces the depleted additives, restores the oil's critical heat dissipation capabilities, and sweeps away the microscopic metal and friction dust that naturally accumulates over time, keeping your internal solenoids operating with factory-spec precision. The second critical habit is conducting a simple visual inspection of your vehicle's parking environment and adjusting your routine to protect your internal locking mechanisms. Pay close attention to how your car behaves when you park on steep driveways or hilly terrain. If you engage your parking brake and then feel the vehicle roll back and settle with a hard mechanical thud, your emergency brake cables or electronic calipers are adjusted too loosely, and the massive weight of your car is still slipping past the brakes to rest directly on that fragile internal parking pawl. Make it a strict habit to test your parking brake's holding power on an incline. Set the brake in neutral. Take your foot off the service brake pedal. Ensure the vehicle remains completely stationary under its own braking power, and only then slide the selector into park. However, as an automotive investigator, I have to give you the complete picture, and that means addressing the potential trade-offs and misconceptions that come with managing a modern, highly sensitive electronic vehicle platform. When you transition from a rapid, sloppy shifting style to a highly disciplined, deliberate pause, you might notice a subtle change in how your vehicle's onboard computer behaves during the first few hundred miles. Because modern transmission control modules utilize continuous adaptive learning algorithms, your vehicle's computer has likely spent months or years jacking up internal hydraulic pressures and delaying clutch engagements to compensate for your historical rolling shifts. When you suddenly introduce a perfect, dead-stop shifting pattern, the computer will initially continue to apply those old, aggressive compensation values to a clean mechanical event. For a brief transition period, your shifts might actually feel slightly firmer or more pronounced than they did before. Do not let this alarm you, and do not assume that your new habit is harming the vehicle. It takes time for the computer's software to track the clean data, recognize that the output shafts are no longer spinning the wrong way during shifts, and gradually scale back its line pressures to factory baselines. Furthermore, you must exercise a degree of patience when driving in extreme weather conditions. On freezing winter mornings, transmission fluid thickens significantly, reducing its flow rate through the incredibly narrow, maze-like channels of the valve body. If you attempt to rush your gear changes when the machinery is cold, that 1-second pause needs to stretch into a 2-second pause to give that thick, viscous oil adequate time to fully pressurize the oncoming circuits. Rushing a cold transmission, even with proper technique, amplifies internal friction wear exponentially. Ultimately, you need to understand that the dynamic between you, your vehicle, and the automotive industry is entirely under your control. The entire modern dealership system is structured around the concept of passive ownership. They want you to simply turn the key, ignore the underlying physics of the machine, drive blindly until something breaks, and then hand over your credit card for an expensive component-level replacement that could have been completely avoided. They count on your lack of knowledge to fund their service bays. By stepping up, taking accountability for your physical driving habits, and understanding the precise mechanical sequences occurring beneath your floorboards, you are completely breaking out of that predatory cycle. You are reclaiming the authority over your vehicle's lifespan. You are proving that a deeply rooted, expensive mechanical failure pattern can be utterly defeated by nothing more than an intentional, 1-second choice made every single time you back out of a space. You have the knowledge. You understand the internal physics, and you know exactly how the machinery was engineered to run. Take the pause, protect your investment, and stop paying the price for habits the industry never wanted you to fix. Treat the machine with respect on the shop floor and out on the pavement, and it will absolutely take care of you for hundreds of thousands of miles down the road.